Hey guys, what's up? It's me, Thomas. Tonight we're back here with the Green Scorpion. Today we got the top 10 fighting games. This was actually, I think, released yesterday since I was still on vacation. So, how about we just stop in and see the top of the top when it comes to the fighting world games, you know? So, who's going to reign supreme? Let's find out. Well, I think a top pick could be, Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, Tekken, definitely. Smash Bros. Count? You never know. So, let's hop in and see where this ranking leads. Be sure to like, subscribe for more. Hope you enjoy. Let's go. Start it up. Oh, and controller stick. Don't want to forget that. Here we go. Start it up.
Hello everyone, the Green Scorpion here, and it's time to put up your dukes. With my top 10 water levels under the bridge, I'm halfway through my Countdown Remastered Marathon, an endeavor that has taken me way longer than expected.
Damn.
But there's a new challenger approaching. Or rather, a returning challenger ready for round 2. I try not to be too hard on myself for my old work. Video making takes practice, of course, so it stands to reason that my older projects aren't up to my current standards. And some of you say that you still like my old videos, so I'm happy to keep them around. But if there's one countdown that I find really flawed, it's my original top 10 fighting games. I've always loved the fighting game genre. What better way is there for two players to clash on an even playing field? I've played dozens of examples
depends
and
how you
was eager
fight.
to share my favorites on my shiny new channel. But long after the original video, I've since embarked on an enlightening journey through the world of fighting games. Tried out as many as I could, followed the experts, and even entered my fair share of tournaments. Fighting games are now one of my favorite genres, for both the evolving science that goes into their design and the robust fan communities that grow around them. And with this greater familiarity comes a deeper understanding of what makes a fighting game good. To be frank, I don't like the choices I made last time. For Pete's sake, I put Dragon Ball Z Budokai 3 as number 1. Still a great game, but looking back at it now...
Doesn't count?
Jeez, I was a naive little turd. I'm not about to delete that video or anything, but knowing what I know now, it's to me one of the biggest L's on my channel. And today, it's time for a rematch 10 years in the making. So for this video, I'm attempting to create a semi-objective list of what I think are the best fighters all around. This is no easy task, and not everyone is going to agree, but rest assured, I put in the work. For what might be my most important remaster, I've consulted with the best of the community, sampled all the games that I could get my hands on, sat under waterfalls, sustained myself off the mana of a single dewdrop, the whole kit and caboodle. And through my training, I've developed a list of criteria that I'll be using to rank the games. Mainly, how do movement, attacks, and other mechanics make each match feel a little different, but equally satisfying? What does the roster of characters look like? And speaking of roster, how well balanced is it? Are the skill floor and skill ceiling appropriate for both newcomers and returning veterans? I'll also be looking at presentation, things like art style, UI, and sound design. This can also include story and lore. Does the game provide a good single-player experience as well as multiplayer? Since we're living in the 21st century, how good is the online experience? And finally, legacy. I don't usually give freebies to older games just for being the first at something, but as this countdown is my love letter to the genre, I feel it's important to consider how each game responded to what came before it and influence what came after. And speaking of influence, I need to give some huge thank yous before we start. First to J.M. Cross, who looked over my list and gave me a lot of tips and pointers. This is the guy to go to if you want to understand the inner workings of tournaments and online play. Second, Smug, who took the time to talk to me about my list and was extremely encouraging and enthusiastic about the whole thing. He's got a lot of fun stuff on his channel, which you can go watch with the greatest of ease. Third, Mena RD, who recently won the title of Capcom Cup Champion and was nice enough to talk to me about the list and about video games as a whole. And finally, one of my greatest YouTube inspirations, Maximilian Dude. I didn't get the chance to talk to him, he's a busy guy, but he's the reason I got into the fighting game community in the first place, and I have his videos to thank for teaching me how intricate and fascinating fighting games can be. But I think that's more than enough for the intro, so let's get this started.
Right.
Tighten those gloves and check those buttons, because this is my Super Top 10 Fighting Games 2 Turbo Edition.
Here we go. You ready? First up, let's see you starting the swing.
If you're at all familiar with the history of fighting games, then you know that Capcom has been one of its biggest contributors from start to present. It was Capcom that set the blueprint for fighting games in 1991 with Street Fighter II, after all. But it was never alone in the genre. Constantly neck and neck with them, like a shonen
SNK.
rival, was SNK, whose 2D fighting games challenged and evolved alongside those released by Capcom throughout the 90s. Their most famous series might be King of Fighters, which didn't crack the top 10 for me. Sorry,
Ouch.
Terry, are you okay?
No!
Well, I'm pretty
Apparently
sure
not.
I won't be, because I'm certain this is gonna piss a few people off. Just gonna put it out there, if I had to pick a KOF rep, it'd be KOF 13. It's just that, while King of Fighters to me exists as an alternative to certain Capcom titles, Samurai Showdown has always been
yeah,
the
we did
best
see it in
example
Parasol
of
Wielders.
what it does. There's more to weapon combat than a longer hitbox. Logically speaking, most trained fighters aren't gonna go down after one punch. But being stabbed? Yeah, it doesn't take a lot of those. Even in samurai movies, the hero might get a few cuts in before going down, but often the deciding moment is with a single hit. That's the principle that Samurai Showdown emulates. But it doesn't go too far, mind you. Bushido Blade was another fighting game that took this to its natural extreme, and it turns out that realistic sword injuries aren't all that fun. So Samsho finds a middle ground.
So basically,
Attacks
the one
generally don't
first
do
one
enough
hit.
damage to render the health bars redundant, but each hit feels like a huge loss. So rather than basing its combat around big combos, Samsho has always emphasized what we in the fighting game field refer to as spacing or footsies. Throw out some light attacks, don't get greedy, and wait for your opening to hack off a third of their lifespan. It's not a game with a ton of mechanics, but these tense trades made Samsho popular enough to churn out near-yearly entries throughout the 90s and early aughts. And then, when the world needed it most, it vanished. But then, 10 years later, SNK discovered the new Samsho, and it looks and plays like a dream. With a beautiful cel-shaded art style and a soundtrack heavy on the shamisen and shakuhachi, Samsho 2019 is the comeback I didn't know I wanted. Take the characters, for example. The series never had the most memorable roster in fighting games, but seeing returning favorites like Nakaruru and Charlotte in fluid 60 frames per second, it reminded me how much I love this squad, while adding new faces like Pirate Weaponsmith Darlie Dagger. And guest characters! In today's market, fighting games are expected to add some out-of-left-field fighters to turn heads and draw in new fans, and Samsho has some good ones like Hibiki from The Last Blade, Gongsun Lee from a MOBA I don't care about, and goddamn Baiken from Guilty Gear, who they were nice enough to make one of the best characters in the meta. And speaking of, the meta is actually fairly balanced, with about 50% of the characters seeing regular tournament play. Mostly Jubei and Shizumaru, but with some Wu Rihyungs and Tam-Tams running around too. More important than your choice of character is your strength of mind. In one of my favorite mechanics, it's possible to disarm your opponent, severely limiting their attack options, and this creates a new mind game. If you lose your weapon, are you going to rush to get it back, or play defensively and wait for a better chance? Are they going to guard the dropped weapon, or shift into a hyper-aggressive assault? While some characters like Haomaru are practically useless without their blade, others like Galford have contingencies to fight without it, and even some weirdos like Wungfu actively disarm themselves for area control and mix-ups. There's a lot to think about with this simple system. And that's where this game is a double-edged katana. It's simple, but it's not easy. Learning the ropes can be very difficult considering the grisly punishment of each stroke you feel
pretty damn high.
And when you do get into playing shape, there's not much room to be creative. Samurai Showdown is like a regimented martial art. You have to learn the steps and play by its rules, or you'll be swept out of the dojo. But it's beautiful to see in motion, and I have a lot of respect for people who master it. Alongside that, you have an arcade mode that does everything it's supposed to do, tell you a little more about each character, and give you a bracket to fight. The tutorials are solid too, and this year it's due to get rollback netcode, which I predict will give the game a second life for all those net warriors out there. It has its flaws, but better to be the best at what you do than to be a respectable imitator of something else, at least in my opinion. And Samurai Showdown 2019 is, to me, the quintessential 2D weapon-based fighting game.
Whew. Nice, Hanzo. GG. And the strong showing from Samurai Showdown. Number 9.
Notice how I said 2D weapon-based fighting game. Because at number 9, we have the
Calibur
3D weapon-based fighting game. The tale of souls and swords eternally retold, Soul Calibur.
Soul Calibur!
Starting with Soul Edge on the Dreamcast,
That'd
the
be
series
sad.
started with a humble premise. Take the 3D combat Namco mastered with the Tekken series, and give everyone swords. Well,
Sounds
Yoshimitsu
alright.
already had a sword,
Hey,
but
Eddie.
anyway. Okay, not everyone has to have swords either. Give some
True.
of them nunchucks, axes, sights, weird hula hoop blades, anything that you can think of that'll get you stopped at an airport. The mechanics were simple to start with. Instead of the light, medium, and heavy attacks that you were used to in most other fighting games at the time, moves in Soul Calibur are defined by their horizontal and vertical coverage, and avoiding damage becomes more complex in this third dimension, gauging what you can back away from, what you can sidestep, and what you'll need to block. It's a more spatial take on the footsies of Samsho, and it's very easy to get into. Beginners could pick their favorite looking fighter, mash some buttons, and you'll probably pull off some crazy looking moves. Rising out of the beginner's bracket then relies on being able to execute those moves consistently. And while each game got a little more nuanced, it still remains great for all skill levels. Even Soul Calibur 5, often loathed for its cuts to the familiar roster, did a lot to tighten the swingy gameplay with more concrete mechanics, and its most recent entry, Soul Calibur 6, is in my opinion the best installment yet, refining the qualities from 5. Quick honorable mention to Soul Calibur 2, which actually might be the most solid title of the series on all fronts. Years later, I can still see myself and many others coming back to this classic. But Soul Calibur 6, I feel, retains the spirit of the older titles, while giving us some of the most refined and fun gameplay we've seen
pretty cool.
yet. I will say that I can't really follow the story anymore. 6 came with a continuity reboot, but it is great to see all my favorites back. Alongside some unexpected guest characters like Halmaru from Samsho, Geralt of Rivia, and...
Witcher?
Is
Nier
that
Automata?
2B? Throw in some newcomers like Gro with his cool and edgy design, and Oswell who's giving me some serious Bayonetta Baldur vibes, and the cast looks and plays better than ever. The 3D models are super clean, blades clash with satisfying particle effects when you land a good parry, we have a meter system now for using supers, and there's a better commitment to game balance. Not only between the characters, though it is nice to see heavies like Siegfried alongside Sophitia and Amy in the upper tiers, but there's also that sense that it's not over till it's over. Comeback mechanics are hard to pull off properly in fighting games. If you don't have any of them, it can make the fight feel trivial once one combatant has pulled ahead. But if you make a comeback mechanic too powerful, like MVC3's X Factor, it can make the first 80% of the fight feel like it didn't even matter. Soul Calibur 6 has two very tasteful comeback balances.
What?
One is the reversal edge, a risk-reward maneuver that can knock an opponent off of you when you're under pressure, but make things worse if you fumble it. And then, Awakening. If you're down 2 stocks in a best of 5, you'll get a passive boost in power to help you catch up. It won't win the game for you, but it will help
It's
you
all on
if
you
can
and your
help
skill level.
yourself. All in all, Soul Calibur 6 is a very smart step forward for the series, and cements the claim that no other fighter can do what Soul Calibur does. At least, not as well. I've played Toshinden. It's a mess.
Good to know.
Ill fortune that led you to me.
Oh, you're not a viewer discretion. Oh boy. Let's see what's going on
I
here.
mentioned earlier that SNK is like the shonen rival to Capcom. More specifically, a friendly rivalry. While it certainly didn't start out that way, Ryo and Dan are certainly evidence of that.
Hey,
Both
Vicky.
developers eventually came to a mutual respect, learning and growing from one another, and even working together on many occasions. Capcom vs. SNK 2 is
cool.
another honorable mention for the list. Look, there are just way too many amazing games out there, alright?
Fair.
Then there's that third rival. The
Ah,
one that
here it
does
comes.
everything
Mortal
in their
Kombat.
power to be what the others aren't. That, my friends, is Mortal Kombat.
Mortal Kombat!
There's some storied
That'd be
history
sad.
to this series, which gave Ryu and Ken a run for their quarters by way of gallons of digitized blood, enough to prompt that ERSB system. But to narrow it down, I'm going with 2015's Mortal Kombat
Kombat X.
Now wait a second, Green Scorpion, or should I say Reptile. What about Mortal Kombat 11? Yes, this is the first time on this list that I'm picking a game that's not the latest incarnation of the series, and Mortal Kombat 11 is a great game in its own right. I just happen to be one of the several in the community who think Mortal Kombat X has higher merit. For one thing, I don't like MK11's meter system. Having separate meters for offensive and defensive maneuvers is a bit cumbersome if you ask me. X's single meter system, to me, encouraged more strategy in how you use this mono resource. And I think MKX has the better roster and had greater longevity. MK11's initial hype died way faster than X's in my experience. But we're not here
I think I had to use the DLC.
What makes Mortal Kombat X good in general? Well, for one thing, it's a return to greatness. Past games like Armageddon overwhelmed players with a massive cast of characters with little distinction between many of them. But X features a fine-tuned cast of returning favorites, from Raiden to Katana.
It's the first of a reboot for the franchise too.
Newcomers like badass cowboy Aaron Black and Insect Queen Devora. Where Soul Calibur 5 misstepped in its attempt at a new generation of fighters, Mortal Kombat X delivers by introducing youngins like Cassie Cage and Jackie, without it coming at the expense of their predecessors like Johnny, Sonya, and Jax. Oh, and after Mortal Kombat 9 set the standard with Freddy Krueger and Kratos as DLC characters, X went wild with Grindhouse guest characters. Jason Voorhees, Leatherface, the Predator, and goddamn Alien who's broken as fuck.
Yeah, the Xenomorph.
I mean, I'm glad it's here, it's cool and everything, but fuck everyone who plays it. I'm not gonna use Sonic Fox. As if this weren't already a stacked grouping, Mortal Kombat X introduces variant movesets, effectively tripling the roster. Each of these iconic killers gets even more to work with, ensuring that not only will you find someone who's right for you, almost anyone can be right for you. There's plenty of pain for everyone, and some of it, unfortunately, for you, the player. Yeah, for one thing, this game is hard. I can respect a high skill ceiling, but you'll need a scissor lift just to reach the floor. It's extremely hard to find safety in the neutral game here. Almost every attack stops you dead in your tracks, and someone who knows what they're doing can trap you in a seemingly endless blockchain. It doesn't help that the controls aren't particularly obvious, but waiting on the other end of this difficulty rainbow is a pot of gold drenched in blood. Look, Mortal Kombat is not a cool adult on a cool motorcycle. It's a prepubescent teen sneaking into an R-rated movie, and it knows that. And it's glorious. X-ray attacks land with a satisfying crunch, heads explode in sanguine showers, and every decision was made with the goal of adding more sinews and silliness. You will laugh your guts out. The entire series revels in itself without apology. Also, the single player in this game rules. You got arcade modes, challenge modes, the combat tower, a crypt to explore, and a story with an actual story that you can actually follow. Many other fighters like Samurai Showdown and Soul Calibur tie their stories entirely to arcade mode, meaning each character follows a parallel timeline with little idea of what is and isn't canon to anything else. Mortal Kombat X's campaign plays out more like a movie, with a beginning, middle, and end. People triumph, people die. It's a beautiful thing. And I'm glad there's so much to do in single player because the online is kind of atrocious. Not the connection, mind you, I never really had too much trouble there. It's just that the gratuitous violence game somehow attracted a toxic fan base. Who'd have guessed? Lots of rage critters on these servers, so many that the devs actually program quitalities that show your opponent's head bursting when they tap out. So, at least they're properly shamed, but this is the realm for the shameless, for better and for worse. I think I'll stick to local play, thank you. I want to see my opponent's face grimace when I freeze dry their spine.
Fair. They always punish the quitters, which, I guess all I have to say is, get good. Otherwise, get out. I mean, what's the point of playing if you're just gonna quit? You know? Yeesh. You know, I remember this, old video back in the day. It was like the 7 deadly sins of video gaming. One of them was basically rage quitting. I don't remember what the sin was. It was tied to. But I do remember the video, but I just don't remember how. But anyway, if I ever find it, I'll post it on the iCard. But anywho, moving along. Ooh. Rip it in half.
Sub-Zero wins. Fatality.
Number 7.
If you were using my top 50 favorite games to try and predict my
ABC
choices, you might be wondering about Dragon Ball FighterZ, a hype-as-hell tag team fighter that's even supplanted Budokai 3 as my favorite Toriyama tournament. Sadly, there wasn't any room for any Saiyans or Namekians on this list, but Goku's legacy has not been in vain, as the team behind FighterZ
Guilty Gear.
took the lessons that they learned and brought them home in Guilty Gear Strive, the greatest anime fighting game to not be based on an anime. Strife is the latest game in the Guilty Gear series, and one of the latest titles from Arc System Works, a company with a fair share of flashy fighters under their belts. I've had mixed experiences with these games. The flashy attacks and over-the-top character designs are great, but the stories just get a little too heavy for me sometimes. In the past, I've had the thankless task of trying to explain BlazBlue lore to a YouTube audience, and it's just so crazy and over the top, and it takes itself so seriously that I just can't get into it. Guilty Gear, on the other hand, yeah, Guilty Gear knows what it is. It's anime bullshit in all the best ways. Ridiculous characters in a convoluted story, all as an excuse for some crazy clashes with magnificent music. And by not taking itself so seriously, I ironically found it easier to get invested as Strive wraps up some of the longest running story arcs with a surprising amount of character growth from series veterans. No offense, BlazBlue fans, those games are good too, but if you want to flame me for a bit, save it for the comments. What might be even more controversial though is my placing Strive over other Guilty Gear games like Xrd. Leading up to its release, Strive received flack for appealing to the filthy casuals. Well, if you want my opinion, yes, Strive simplifies its systems which caters to newcomers, and it is absolutely to the game's benefit. In fact,
I mean, hey, if they're gonna just stay for the fan base, they're not gonna expand.
Surprisingly accessible fighters in the current landscape. The old 20-hit combos are mostly replaced with shorter, more damaging attack strings, making rounds shorter and drastically lowering the skill floor without lowering the skill ceiling. And no, new players didn't start beating pro gamers like some of the fanbase feared. It just meant that newbies had a place to start. Bolstering that accessibility is a fine-tuned tutorial system and probably the best online matchmaking system in the business. Nothing kills a player's drive to get better more than being curb stomped by Timmy Two-Frame in their first ranked match. Guilty Gear Strive ensures you're playing with people at your actual skill level and gives every character a few simple maneuvers that will make you feel awesome before guiding them down the road to become awesomer.
Excellent!
As for game balance, yeah, there's a pretty even use of characters in the tournament scene. Happy Chaos, you've had your time. Get out of here.
Get out.
This is helped by the fact that the game is still evolving. ArcSys designed these characters with room to grow and has added new tricks and combo potentials to everyone in the roster over the past year so that everyone in the player base can learn together as the game evolves. In an age where fighting games are a bit of a financial gamble for anyone not named Capcom, this devotion to building a healthy community is so important. And the game looks amazing. ArcSys really mastered this cel-shaded art style with detailed 3D models that still look like the cleanest 2D cartoon you've ever seen. The camera whips around the fighters when they unleash their overdrives and super moves, making every bout feel like a well-choreographed action scene. It's an incredibly cinematic experience, and when I think about fighting games going forward, this is the kind of thing that I want to see. The future of the genre is looking bright.
It does look pretty cool. I might think of it try sometime, you know? Cool puppy.
Wins.
Those same clever longtime fans using my top 50 probably had a guess at my number 1 as well. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. And look, I'd love to, but I can't justify it. Smash is such a different experience from anything else on this list, and while I'm glad to see more platform fighters gaining notoriety like Multiverses and Rivals of Aether, ranking Smash as my number 1 would feel like ranking an orange above a list of mostly apples. That said, oh my god, I love this series. With Nintendo being one of my favorite things in the world, a game devoted to combining all of its franchises was always going to be a win in my book. Even more so as they added more and more third-party representatives to make, dare I say, the greatest playable roster in history. And one of the biggest. Ultimate's everyone is here approach of bringing back every character, no matter how insignificant,
we all freaked.
is something I've only ever seen in, like, I don't know, Mortal Kombat Armageddon? Maybe Capcom vs. SNK? But I digress. While Smash has a few sets of very similar clones, particularly of the sword character,
I mean, it was pretty much a holiday when they announced a new fighter.
You know? Characters are unique and interesting, and kinda, sorta balanced. I mean, there's clear separations on the tier list with Joker, Pikachu, and against all odds, Steve dominating competitive play. But the characters commonly found on the bottom rung, like K. Rool, Ganondorf, and Zelda, are just so much fun to play. At any skill level, you'll see Ensemble Dark Horse picks come in and hopstool everything you thought you knew about the meta. Big shout out to Peanut and his devastatingly amazing Little Mac. And that's great because having so many recognizable characters and having all of them at least function competitively, it goes a long way towards making Smash Bros. In some respects, one of the more approachable fighting games on the scene. As diverse as the roster is, once you get a sense for the game's mechanics, it's easy enough to go from character to character and seeing what works for you. This isn't Mortal Kombat or Street
Everyone's
Fighter,
got their own
where each character
style.
has unique inputs for their attacks.
Well, it
Everyone
depends on
has
how
a
you play.
jab, 3 tilts, 3 smashes, 5 aerials, and 4 specials.
Yep.
More or less. Some characters are harder to pick up than others, like Olimar with his Pikmin cycle, or Hero with his Lexicon of Down B specials. But for the most part, you can pick up any new character and be on the skill floor in minutes. And this is where I have to be a little bit tougher on Smash Ultimate, because while we advertise it as a party game, it really isn't as easy to improve at the game as we all make it out to be. In terms of single player, there's not a lot in the game itself to help new players improve. There's thought put into the classic
there is
mode
World
with
of
each
Light,
character's
but,
track, sure, and training mode has some nice tools for practicing combos if you already know what you're doing, but it could really use some of Guilty Gear's character-specific training courses. God, I miss Break the Targets. Without YouTubing combos for your character of choice, there's just nothing intuitive in-game that helps you find out what strings work, nothing that suggests mapping quick tilts to your controls, and nothing in the single-player mode compelling you to try out more characters. I think World of Light made a lot of promises in its initial trailer that it just wasn't able to uphold. Like, sure, it would have been hard to do another Subspace Emissary with this many characters to balance, but what we're left with is a dauntingly long list of event matches that most players just aren't going to see through. And if you don't have friends nearby to play with, you're stuck either fighting computers or trying your luck with Nintendo's geriatric online servers, long since the Achilles heel of Smash. But while we never got the full cinematic story mode we thought we wanted, Sakurai has worked himself to the bone to put every drop of his blood, sweat, and tears into the game's multiplayer. After Melee's twitchy exploits made it a tournament
say it was supposed to be his last.
Sakurai feared an overly competitive fanbase would push out the casual market. He overcorrected a bit with Brawl, but in Smash 4 and finally Ultimate, we saw a dedication to balance and high skill play that I really appreciate. Everything in Ultimate is quick, responsive, and keeps the match going. Freeze frames and hit stop effects give the final blow of each match an extra oomph, and no game has ever been so hyped to watch in the news cycle. There's never been anything like it before, and while other companies are getting closer to matching its frenetic energy, there will always be a Smash-shaped place in my heart.
Don't we all agree? When they come out with Smash news, you know you watch. And
to get back on track here with more traditional fighting mechanics, let's move on from one of the biggest companies in video games to some of the smallest. Indie developers serve a vital purpose in our modern gaming ecosystem. Small, dedicated teams that can worry less about repaying their army of investors, and more on manifesting those perfect concepts that lived in our imaginations for decades. Though fighting games as a genre have also been developed closer to the consumer, listening to player feedback to balance and patch each new entry, we don't see a ton of indie games
took them
making
a few
it big.
years to get there.
There's the aforementioned Rivals of Aether, Brawl Out, them's Fightin' Herds. But there's only one that I can think of that really made its mark on the fighting scene proper. A little ditty called Skullgirls. The path for Skullgirls was never easy. In fact, the whole thing was nearly left in development hell when Reverge Labs was forced to lay off most of its staff in a lengthy legal dispute. But Reverge eventually came back with a vengeance, rebranding as Lab Zero Games and bringing Skullgirls to life on a wave of Kickstarter support. And I mean, come on, why wouldn't crowds want to fund this? Look at it, it's freaking beautiful. Starring a crazy cast of creative characters, every frame of every move of every fighter is meticulously hand-drawn, resulting in some of the cleanest sprite work ever put on screen. And unlike most other series on this list that draw from a bank of characters dating back to the 90s, Skullgirls needed to introduce an entirely new ensemble and make us fall in love instantly. A task that they were more than up to. Each member of the cast is based off a bizarre visual choice that informs everything you might expect them to do. Cerebella wears a set of beefy arms as a hat, Peacock is a killer cartoon from the 1930s, Valentine is a sexy malpractice suit waiting to happen, and with the vibrant animations, each of the concepts goes about 8 steps further than you might expect. Skullgirls takes inspiration from several fighting games, which you can see heavily expressed in each character's plethora of color options. But one influence that stands out in the character design aspect specifically is Darkstalkers, Capcom's colorful monster mash that gave us beloved characters like John Talbane and Morrigan the Succubus. Skullgirls goes for a similar madcap tone. It's kinda cute, kinda badass, full of TNA, but able to shift into grotesque horror at any moment. It reminds you that however adorable these girls look, they're all monsters in one form or another. I also really appreciate the addition of Big Band and Beowulf, the Skull Boys as it were. I'm not entirely sure how to explain this, but growing up, so many multiplayer games were either predominantly male with 1 or 2 playable women, or all women in the case of some shameless cheesecake games. I like the idea of a game being predominantly female for once while still having a few token guys. Like, somehow that feels more feminist to me than if it were only girls. And speaking of, if you want to know more about these characters, don't worry, there's a whole lot of dialogue in the various arcade modes. Now onto the gameplay side of things, Skullgirls here mimics the Capcom Versus titles. Quick-moving characters with explosive hitboxes in a cramped 2D space, complete with invisible walls just begging you to bounce your ragdolled opponents against. Not to mention the assist system popularized by Marvel vs. Capcom, where you can switch between teammates or just call them in for a second with a little combo extending move. Just take heed when you call them out though, or the opponent will start singing happy birthday.
Oh my goodness. Happy birthday. That's not gonna feel
That literally just happened.
And unique to Skullgirls is the choice of how many characters to have on your team. You can choose just your favorite fighter to go solo, or up to 3, and your opponent can do the same, allowing for 3v3s, 2v3s, 1v3s, 2v2s, 1v2s, or just straightforward 1v1s, all in the standard game mode. Well, I shouldn't say that this is completely unique. This is basically Capcom vs. SNK 2's ratio system. I'm bringing that game up a lot, I've noticed. But the balancing here is so unbelievably clean, adjusting each fighter's amount of health and accounting for assist combo potential to make things feel square no matter the combinations. Even the roster feels impeccably balanced. I don't see too many people running Painwheel or Squiggly, but no one's below C tier. And even characters with a lot of bad matchups can be circumvented if you team them up with better ratio combatants like Eliza or Fukua. And yeah, I should mention, while the cast is fairly small, and can you blame them, they had to hand draw all this, everyone has unique movesets, except they added an exact palette swap of Philia named Fukua just as a joke for how fighting games have always had clone characters. Particularly, it was a jab at Street Fighter 4's final character reveal, which teased a bunch of triumphant returns before unveiling a new girl who looks exactly like Cammy. Ironically, Decapre wasn't all that similar to Cammy gameplay-wise, and Fukua is much the same, sporting her own moveset that is actually more competitive than the original Philia. And if it sounds like I keep getting off topic here, it's because Skullgirls reminds me how much I love fighting games. It doesn't have the same legacy as older franchises, obviously, but its significance lies in how it was able to absorb so much from its influencers, shake them up with a fresh coat of paint, and deliver a punch big enough to influence those older titles right back. And hopefully, Skullgirls keeps going strong and eventually becomes one of those older franchises someday. It recently underwent another change in studio after some untoward conduct behind the scenes at Lab Zero, but don't make this concept pay the price for its seedier devs. This series is way too good to be left in the dark. Or stuck on mobile for that matter. I'm ready for a third encore any day now.
That's a wrap. 4.
If Skullgirls is the student that became the master, then Marvel vs. Capcom 2 is the master that never retired.
Here we go. Get ready.
Ready?
Hey. Got all the music.
Marvel vs. Capcom 2. New Age of Heroes.
This one actually took me a while to rank. I originally did have Skullgirls surpassing MVC2. Skullgirls does a great job with Marvel's tagging system, and has the neat addition of 1v3s and such, but when you really break it down, I wouldn't say it does the system better or worse than Marvel, and the magnitude of influence MVC had on the fighting scene just can't be denied. Skullgirls and so many other games like it wouldn't exist without Marvel 2, so until further notice, Skullgirls is still looking up. As for choosing 2 over any other MVC title, well, I've said before that my personal favorite is Marvel vs. Capcom 1 Clash of Heroes, but that comes from a very personal place, being that it was in the arcade near my house growing up. And while Marvel 3 gets points for a nice 3D art style and endearing quips between heroes, there's a reason why 2 is still being played at professional tournaments. For starters, it's kind of the Smash Ultimate of its franchise. Don't let that number 2 fool you. New Age of Heroes is actually the 6th game in its series, following a number of licensed Marvel games made by Capcom. When this game came out in 2000, the developers were sitting on a stockpile of fully designed pixelated pugilists, so what else is there to do than just pour them all in? Everyone is here, plus some new weirdos like Amigo the Cactus Man. What to new players was their favorite Saturday morning cartoons duking it out with some guy named Hayato, to me, it was the culmination of an ever-evolving battle system. Like Dr. Doom, you may think of him as a stoic master of magic and metal. I see him as...
Foot dive! Foot dive!
Die! Foot dive!
And with this eye-boggling collage of 52 colorful characters, you're sure to find someone that works for you. Magneto, Cable, Storm, Sentinel... yeah, probably one of those 4. Okay, so downside to this massive cast, it's not balanced. Like, at all. They pulled in all of this gravy without taste testing it first, and now it's really salty. But is it weird for me to say that that's part of the charm? It's no coincidence that this game is still seeing regular play, and why Capcom bothers to keep re-releasing it with a netcode Smash Brothers could never dream of. All in all, it just feels great. The skill floor is fairly low. I mean, it might feel stiff to players who come in on games like Smash Brothers, but it doesn't take long for newbies to learn a few simple combos. Here, I'll teach you one right now. Launcher, super jump, light, medium, heavy, slam them down. Works with almost every character, and though you're not going to win serious matches with just that, Marvel has a way of making even the simplest maneuvers feel great to pull off. From there, you can put in the time to start learning longer combos, maybe even infinites. And there's a lot of room for creativity, considering that you have to learn at minimum 3 mains. This is where the team's strategy comes in, choosing a point man, a mid, and an anchor. Finding synergy in their assist moves that can launch an enemy up after you knock them down for a cool reset, switching to a more defensive character to give your harder hitter some time to recuperate, and deciding on a dime how to spend your hard-earned super meter. It does dampen creativity when the same team of 3 beats it down for the 40th time online, but luckily, the pro players made their own solution. Ratio matches. Proposed by Justin Wong and Xiaoweb, the ratio system is an initiative in the fanbase that breathes new life into the static meta. Simply put, every character is given a point value based on where they are on the tier list, and players are given a set amount of points to buy their team. So if you want one of those broken baddies like Cable, you might have to pick up a cheaper hero to compensate like Servbot Roll or... Ah, Chun-Li, what did they do to you? And with this new rule set, suddenly the game feels like new again. With fresh combinations emerging, strategies revolving around Colossus and Babyhood, and again, we can appreciate how hype these matches are. That's the biggest negative of this game, patched up by the fanbase, and there's even mods in the PC version that implement this for you. Other than that, the only complaints are things that don't really matter in the long run. For instance, arcade mode is very bare bones. I guess like Smash Brothers, it was too large a task to personalize the story for so many characters, but the aesthetic of this game is so flashy and arcadey that I was never led to expect anything more. Also, I can vaguely remember a video back in the day where Screw Attack talked about this game, and their only issue was the jazz music. Craig, buddy, thank you for everything you've done for online game reviews, but that was a garbage take. This soundtrack is amazing. This game wants to take you for a ride, and by God, it's gonna do it.
There you go. Yeah, can't go wrong. Like, considering the still sees play, you know they did something right. You know, I mean, the true mark of a classic is people willingly coming back to play it again and again. Which, he really nails it with Marvel vs. Capcom 3, huh? Or 2, sorry. Anyway, so we're done with the final 3. So, most of the heavy hitters are out. Still haven't yet to see the Street Fighter entry. So if I had to pick, I think that he might go with Street Fighter 4. I mean, if he goes 6, I'll be surprised, but never know. No, let's see the top 3. What's up?
We've seen the best team-based fighting game, the best platform fighting game, the best 2D weapon-based fighting game, and the best 3D weapon-based fighting game. Now at number 3, we have the best 3D fighting game overall.
Oh?
Is there really a point to building this up? You know it's Tekken! And it's not like
Fair.
the category is completely barren. You've got the Street Fighter EX series, Dead or Alive, Pokken Tournament. Well, Pokken Tournament is just Pokemon put into a unique take on the Tekken engine. It's right there in the name.
Pretty much.
While not the first fighter to let you sidestep through the Z-axis, massive honorable mention to Virtua Fighter for revolutionizing the aspect, I'd argue it was Tekken 3 that first made it feel really good to move in 3D space. And since then, every mainline entry in the series has been a flying leap forward in visuals and mechanics, which brings us to Tekken 7. Probably the most impressive fighting game I've ever seen from a technical standpoint.
Really?
So much thought went into these realistically rendered, realistically proportioned human bodies. How they look, how they move, how they bounce off the walls and floors. Everything has a palpable weight to it. I think of Tekken similarly to how I think of the Yakuza series. It's a grounded setting with semi-realistic characters, but everything is turned up to 11, not the least of which is the family melodrama at the center of it all.
Oh, let me
4 generations of patricidal billionaire bodybuilders sit at the center of a sprawling cast of cyborgs, schoolgirls, bodyguards, and bears, with Tekken 7 introducing the evil CEO's previously assumed dead wife, who's the most evil of them all. It's like a telenovela directed by John Woo. And unlike Mortal Kombat with its alternate dimensions and lightning gods, Tekken keeps its characters' feet, or paws in some cases, firmly on Earth, and at times downplays the more outwardly ridiculous features of these fighters, only so that it can play up how ridiculous the emotional ties of these characters can be. If you only play this game for the multiplayer, you're doing yourself a serious disservice. It's honestly got one of the better story modes I've ever seen in a fighting game.
Really?
Also, there's a whole ass bowling game in here, and it's actually a great bowling game.
Damn.
And I'd be remiss not to mention, Tekken 7 is vying for the coveted title of weirdest guest characters. Akuma made his way over from Street Fighter, which was pretty funny because at the time he had yet to be in Street Fighter 5. Then, as the seasons progressed, we got Geese Howard from King of Fighters, and then some bizarre additions like Noctis from Final Fantasy 15, and Negan from AMC's The Walking Dead.
Negan? What the hell?
That's got to be the weirdest inclusion in a fighting game since the Hornet from Fighters Megamix. I have a feeling we can expect Walter White in Tekken 8. That's as good of a segue as any to get into the actual gameplay of this fighter. Despite how technical it is with how bodies roll and bounce, it's actually a pretty easy game to get into. Or at least it's easy to just mash buttons and do some cool looking kicks. But at the highest level of play, it's an intensely skill-dominated mind game. Though you might not know it from watching footage for the first time. Unlike Soul Calibur, characters are unarmed, besides the rare katana and chainsaw arm. And even enhanced individuals save their paranormal powers for their more advanced maneuvers. As such, moves don't have as much range, but those that do take more time to pull off or to recover from. But the greater sense of weight makes dodging these attacks much harder than you might expect. There's a very active blocking system, and the timer in standard play ticks by pretty darn quickly. So most of the time, matches are less about downing your opponent, and more about getting the most hits in by the end of the round. You know, like an actual martial arts tournament. More so than any other game on this list, Tekken is a game played in the neutral. The hell does that mean? Well, the neutral is a period of the match where neither side is being hit. You're not dealing damage or taking damage. You and your opponent are sizing each other up, figuring out how to get in and make an impact. Every character has a few safe moves, little pokes that can be thrown out and stack chip damage without leaving you open, but if you poke too much or get predictable, your opponent might take the offensive and run in with a big attack string. But if you manage to parry that hit, that leaves them open for your own decisive blow. And with walls and other objects potentially blocking your dodge routes or even enhancing your combo,
but basically it's whoever can get the other to blink first.
Any other game on this list.
I see.
Next to Smash Brothers, of course. I know I brought this fight up before in my top 50, but the match between JDCR and me is the perfect spectacle to understand this skill ceiling. Each player measuring out their trades with surgical precision, trying to get that last word in when the timer drops to the single digits. It's maybe not the flashiest fighter, but to me, it is magical.
So it's less of a fight, more of a strategy game.
Wholeheartedly to realism, while at the same time featuring some of the most surreal bullshit I've ever seen. And I have no reason to suspect Tekken 8 won't be just as great. No notes, Namco. Just keep doing what you're doing. And maybe consider that Walter White idea. Give him phosphorus bombs, maybe let him throw a pizza. I think I'm onto something here.
Maybe a different game for Walter White. And number 2.
Ultra Combo!
Hello, Killer Instinct.
Let's look at the year that the original Killer Instinct came out, 1994. The fighting game genre had just found its footing 3 years ago, and titles were filling up arcades. Imitator companies were copying the colorful antics of Street Fighter, but Ken Lobb joined Rareware with a plan to target Mortal Kombat's fanbase, with a combo system based off of SNK titles.
Oh,
In
let's bloody, I
retrospect, some
think.
experts in the community say that Killer Instinct was a little primitive in design for its time, making stupidly long combos too easy and slapping the combo breaker system on like a band-aid. But with its cutting-edge
Still,
graphics, Mortal
gotta love when
Kombat
it goes,
finishers, and an
"Ultra
announcer whose
Combo!"
shouts rang across the room, Killer Instinct garnered attention in a sea of samey wannabe
chai.
Street Fighters. Now, let's look at the environment Killer Instinct was rebooted into, 2013. Fighting games had dipped in popularity for a decade. Even Tekken was seeing its longest delay between mainline releases. Recently, the genre had been revitalized again by, who else? Street
Fighter 4.
and Mortal Kombat. And Marvel vs. Capcom 3 riding that nostalgia wave. But these once drastically different series were all suffering from the same foibles, footsies and rocket tag. Once you got caught in a combo, you just gotta wait for it to end or hope that your opponent drops an input. The medium needed a mix-up, and ironically, it would be the series known for ultra combos to fix the industry's combo problem. Killer Instinct was back, and this time, it understood game design. It can't be overstated how fresh and gratifying Killer Instinct's gameplay was, and still is. It's kind of the opposite to what I praised about Tekken 7. This game is almost never in neutral.
Yeah, look at Full
If you
Boy,
went
that's a
2
classic
seconds without
skin.
someone getting clocked in the face, something's wrong. Killer Instinct promotes an extremely aggressive style of play. All of the characters are fast. Even the lethal glaciers like Aghanos and zoners like Conra pull their moves out with minimal windup that most other fighters would envy. And because of that, it's probably the least accessible game on this list. Improvement relies on diligently honing muscle memory and the ability to adapt your strategy around the game's distinct mechanics. First of all, there's 2 kinds of damage. Normal damage, where your health bar fully depletes, and gray damage, which results in glancing blows or unfinished combos that can be healed up over time. Second of all, there are no infinites. There's some pretty long combo strings, but eventually this bar will fill up and you'll drop your ragdolling opponent, meaning it's up to you to put a finisher on that string before it's cut off. There are ways to reset the bars for longer combos, but those take resources like meter or instinct mode, and still are far from infinite. So unlike Marvel 3, it doesn't feel like the whole match is decided when the first combo starts. And third,
Combo Breaker! There we
if
go.
you're getting comboed, you have a chance to break out by reading whether the next swing is going to go for light, medium, or heavy. Adding this little mind game
chance
into the
to
mix
break.
and keeping agency for whichever player is currently getting beaten like an egg. These 3 innovations
And a chance for
alone
comebacks.
make Killer Instinct a fighting game like no other, and one of the most rewarding systems to learn. And even that doesn't fully encapsulate how good this game is. We haven't even touched on the game's sense of personality yet. Killer Instinct's hyper-aggressive mechanics could only be achieved with a fierce legion of playable
that,
fighters.
ending.
There's 29 in total, which may not seem like a lot in a post-Ultimate world, but considering mastery requires rote memorization not just of your character's combos and mix-ups, but those of any possible opponent, it's probably a good thing that we didn't hit 30. After 3 seasons of updates, though, we can say that everyone is here from the previous games. And considering their long period of radio silence, I was surprised how excited I was for each return trailer. This reboot did a great job redesigning the characters as well, punching up some of the more generic designs like Spinal and Tusk. And as for the new additions, these vampires, robots, and low-key off-putting ghost girls are right at home with the cast. Not to mention the crossover additions. Dead or Alive had a playable Spartan from Halo, but Killer Instinct gave us the Arbiter. Now that is a mix-up. Followed by General Ram, the villain from Gears of War, and for good measure,
Rash?
Mother effing Rash from Battletoads, who can
How?
Cossack kick his opponents while making uncomfortable eye contact with you through the 4th wall. This is so cursed, and I love it. There's definitely favorites in the meta, but the gulf between the best and worst characters isn't actually that wide. Even low-tier characters are known to party crash the big tournaments. One thing I always look for in balance is whether or not the heavies have a place in the meta, or if they're going to be Ganondorfed into F tier. And yeah, big guys like Gargos are holding their own against standards like Jago and technicals like Arya. Whoever you pick, learning the ins and outs of their moveset is extremely rewarding. Particularly the Ultra combos, each of which have its own musical beat.
Think so. There you go.
They had no reason to go this hard with these details, but I am so glad they did.
Damn.
And the presentation. Holy hell, the presentation. Hit stops, blinding particle effects, the backgrounds crumbling apart in the shockwave of your mighty blows, and attention must be paid to the composer Mick Gordon. Yeah, same guy who composed the score for the new Doom games. This guy is a genius of rock and metal. This game goes so hard while still being one of the smartest designed fighters in the genre. And 9 years later, no other titles have really tried to do the same thing. They wouldn't dare. But they've certainly learned something from it.
Amen.
It was the wake-up call that fighting games needed. Stagnation will not be tolerated.
Come over here. And number one, we know
By
what
now
it
it's probably
is.
obvious that my number one is a Street Fighter game. It's just hard to talk about fighting games as a whole
That
without
begs the
referencing
question.
it.
Which
It's the
one?
blueprint, the Rosetta Stone for any game where two people punch each other in the face. But that doesn't answer the question. Which Street Fighter is king? On my top 50, I mentioned Street Fighter V was my personal favorite. As the newest
More
edition
personal,
at the time,
but-
it has the most polish, so it's the one I'm most likely to pick up now if I just want to throw some Hadokens, and yeah, I know, elephant in the room, I'll get there. However, I've made it a point to rank this countdown based on legacy, and let's just say that there's some aspects of Street Fighter V that I prefer not to see in future installments. If we're going
Fair.
purely on influence, it would be no contest for Street Fighter 2. It set the bar of quality
Well,
for
it's
the
this thing
genre
ate butt,
almost
so-
accidentally by introducing grappling, canceling animations for combos, and maybe the first playable roster to feel both varied and balanced. And yeah, Street Fighter 6 has since been released, and while I would love to put it on the list given the incredible reception
played.
it's been getting, I still feel the game needs more time to stew before we can give it a proper judgment. I spent a long time mulling over this decision, but after consulting with others in the community and replaying the entire catalog myself, it's clear where the series peaked.
Oh? Huh. Okay.
Welcome to the world of Street Fighter 3.
3?
For battle.
Wait, really? Huh. I think this is where it's going, but we'll see.
Let's not forget, Street Fighter 3 was a bit of a gamble for Capcom, and one that didn't pay off immediately. They were doing
cured
fine
immedi-
milking Street Fighter 2 with new additions and updates, not to mention Street Fighter Alpha, Street Fighter EX, Street Fighter the movie, the game, yeah, that's a thing that happened. But when the time came for a true sequel, a new Roman numeral, Capcom took a risk with a massive departure. Street Fighter 3 A New Generation committed the cardinal sin of dropping the entire previous cast, a hard blow for fans who had fallen in love with Blanka or Zangief. Ryu and Ken were only added at the last minute due to negative fan reception. Sales were disappointing to say the least, but Capcom stuck to their guns and continued work on the engine, releasing the improved Street Fighter 3 Second Impact later the same year. Then 2 years after that, the final version of the game dropped, Third Strike. And with the pain of losing E Honda
Three strikes.
subsided, fans were finally ready to see the game for what it was. The
Really?
most finely tuned fighter Capcom has ever had.
Like
Let's
that?
talk about the cast. They didn't get a fair shake when they first arrived, but Street Fighter 3's roster is full of dynamic and memorable combatants, each with their own unique playstyle. You got Alex, originally planned to be the main character instead of Ryu, with an advanced grapple-based moveset like a cleaner Zangief. Dudley, a strapping boxer with reactionary cross counters and a butler who serves you tea after he kicks your ass, and Elena, a smooth capoeira-based fighter with a range you're not expecting. Oh, and Oro, a crazy old man who fights you with only one arm. Each
One
of these
arm.
characters are weird, wonderful, full of detail and personality, and there's a reason that we go nuts every time one of them makes a return in future titles.
Hey, Wookie.
We hardly needed Ken and Ryu, but they fit right in with this eclectic group as the obligatory Shodos. Capcom eventually added 2 more returning veterans by Third Strike, and fun fact, if you count his spirit in Smash Ultimate, Akuma is the character to appear in the most games on this list thanks to Tekken 7. And Chun-Li got her revenge from Marvel 2, and is easily the best on the tier list. Which, granted, isn't the most balanced. It's largely Chun-Li, Ken, Yun, and Yang in the big leagues, but outside of the highest level of play, most characters still get picked up by professionals for just how much fun they are to play. And that's the most important thing. I mean, the only characters I never see used are Necro and 12. Is that because they're bad? No, it's because they're no fun. And they're bad. But then again, I did see some good Necros roaming around lately. But everyone else, Sean with his silly basketball setups, Urien with his shields, my girl Ibuki, Remy who took a page out of Guile, it's a surprisingly fun group. Even Q. Practically speaking, this character sucks, but damn do people love him.
Oh, let's go! Yes! Oh, I love this character when I win. I hate it when I lose.
And these characters are complemented by an undeniable sense of style. Street Fighter 2 took the fighters from all over the world, but 3 is what really took them to the streets, with a distinct urban style in the stages, the menus, the music, on top of some of the cleanest pixel art of its era. And despite the strangeness of some of the characters, the color palette and detail of the environments give the game a sense of grit and grounding, which packs extra crunch to the big hits. Ryu's Shin Shoryuken still makes me tense up my stomach every time I see it. And as for the gameplay, all of the lessons Capcom learned in the 90s and 2000s, from Alpha to Darkstalkers to the Versus series, culminate here into an incredibly clean experience. Fast-paced like Street Fighter 2 Turbo, the ability to spring up from a fall if you can tech the landing, and multiple categories of super attacks. Each character has multiple super arts, which you can equip in the select screen, giving the player more choice. Linking these to different sized energy bars makes it feel like there's more going on in the fight. And while there are some tried and true strategies, the sheer amount of options leaves room for creativity in how you get the job done. Then there's Street Fighter 3's greatest contribution to the genre, parrying. Blocking is an important part of the rock, paper, scissors relationship of Street Fighter moves, but by its nature, it's the most passive. Now, blocking some attacks causes chip damage, so you can't just turtle up forever.
Really?
But, what if instead of holding the block, you wait until the exact frame the blow connects and press forward? Now you get a parry, which completely negates damage and has you limber and ready to counter. It's a powerful tool, but one that takes an incredible amount of skill to use consistently, particularly against multi-hit moves. This is what eventually led to the single most famous match in competitive fighting game history, Evo Moment 37, the Daigo parry.
Oh yeah, this! Oh! There it is! Get it!
Third Strike was able to give us this moment because it is, in my humble opinion, the closest we've gotten to a perfect fighting game. It revolutionized the series that revolutionized the genre. It created a system that was easy to learn, hard to master, and hype as hell to watch. It created fan favorites and paradigm-shifting mechanics. It capped off the Dreamcast/PS2 era of fighting games with graceful flair. And most importantly, it brought back the car-smashing minigame. Clearly, Street Fighter 6 is drawing inspiration from Third Strike, and I cannot tell you how much fun I've been having with this game. Jamie and I are smashing heads online. So Capcom, you think you can top yourself again?
You never know.
Sure you can. I'm the Green Scorpion, and seriously, thank you for sticking with this video, way past the timer and into sudden death. Clearly I have a lot of love for these games, and I'm certain that this list will make a lot of people happy, and just as many pissed off. Please keep in mind that all of this is the purest opinion of someone who adores the genre, backed by as much research and objectivity as possible, but I acknowledge wholeheartedly that I could be very wrong here. And if you agree, disagree, or just want to give me some food for thought, feel free to challenge me in the comments with some of your favorite fighting games. I'll see you all in the streets.
You know, he actually has a point. You're not gonna please everyone, so... well, just do what you can, right? Anyway, hope you enjoyed that one. Let me know what you guys think of this one. Till next time, adios, and let me know your favorite fighting game.